Michael here with you for another BookNest.eu review for you. Today I'll be reviewing The Vale by Brian D. Anderson. I got a pre-release e-copy of this book. I believe this book will be coming out through Audible, and I think Brian's working on a Dead Tree deal as well. So keep a lookout for that if you're interested in this book. And I'll be sharing with you my thoughts here right now. Brian D. Anderson's The Vale is a book that kind of borrows an aesthetic that's not traditional to a lot of fantasy novels. He's kind of taking like a westernized novel version of the Japanese role-playing game aesthetic, the anime, manga aesthetic, the world. And I'm going to try to keep this like pretty light spoilers here for this review. The world is kind of built around, there's a main city, which, we're told the mana erupts from this city and provides power and safety for the Vale, and you can't go outside the barrier, and everybody kind of depends on the city because the land's dead and everything. And like Final Fantasy VII with like the Shinra Corporation, there's some kind of like shady stuff going on, like we're not really sure about how all this works here with the city and the mana and everything, but it's clear that there are conspiracies that abound here, and there's some interesting things that are revealed with that. I don't want to reveal those now, but like this idea is kind of a cool idea. There are mysterious hellspawn creatures. Our main character carries a sword and a gun, but it's not really a normal gun. It's like a magic gun that he's able to channel through the crystal in his chest, channel magical power through his P-37, and he keeps the sword on his back. And so that kind of aesthetic is really neat for a novel. And I tell you what, I really enjoyed the first part of this novel, probably more than any of it, because it was just kind of getting into the aesthetic. And kind of the beginning kind of almost reads like a western, like the guy goes into the bar and there's a stranger. That guy you just caught, that man over there killed him after you turned him in. It's like, what? And he's like, he's gonna kill you now. And so that kind of opening to the novel is really interesting to me. And and then all this stuff goes down, and we're not really in a saloon. He comes out of this bar and he gets in his car. So this kind of like clashing of aesthetics, this kind of like urban fantasy, second world urban fantasy kind of vibe that the beginning of this book has, really kind of hooked me. And then as I went on, I personally got less interested, but that core aesthetic, that core idea is really good. When the books really worked for me, it was when the kind of weird elements, that kind of contrast of, those kind of disparate elements that kind of work in that kind of Final Fantasy Tales aesthetic of like pseudo magic technology, that kind of weird combination of those things combined with like an urban fantasy kind of vibe. The pacing of the story is relatively fast. It kind of slows down. It kind of felt like it slowed down towards the end. But the pacing is relatively good. So even though, like, interestingly, I don't think this book worked spectacularly for me, I do appreciate that the pacing kind of kept me going along. I didn't. So like, even if I was like less interested in a particular character or particular part of the story, nothing ever kind of lingers too long. There's a kind of a progressive action. Our characters remain somewhat proactive, or something else happens to them, and so there's not really too much of a lull there. One of my favorite things about this book? My favorite things about this book would be that aesthetic. It would be a particular character. His name is Bane. If you do listen to read this book, I'd be curious to see what you guys thought about it. Bane's just kind of one of those like classic kind of Japanese characters, just kind of like wrapped in mystery. Like, is he a good guy or a bad guy? He kind of like, it's kind of like a gray Jedi kind of figure. Like, you can't really tell where his loyalties lie, and if he does bad things in the service of good, or if he's just a good guy with a dark past or whatever. And seeing that kind of the journey of not so much that Bane is on, but our perception of him throughout the novel That was probably my favorite part. And I really, if Brian says, hey, I've got a book about this character, Bane, I'm probably going to check that out because I thought that was really interesting. Things that were less satisfying about this book, overall, I thought, you know, generally with this aesthetic and this stuff, maybe things could be taken a little farther. You know, like our main character carries a sword and a magic gun, and he uses the sword maybe twice or three times, and I just wanted more. I just wanted more of like crazy, wacky anime action. You know, we have a main character that carries a sword on his back. You know, have him use it as much as possible is my opinion. But you know, that's not maybe the story that Brian wanted to tell, especially in this first novel, and that leads me to the other problem that I have with it is that generally I felt it was a little unsatisfying as a book in of itself, by itself. I thought that it should have been more satisfying as a book one in a series. It kind of leads a lot. It seems like the end of the book is really not the end of book one, but really like the beginning of book two, which is like, doesn't make me feel great. So overall, not my personal favorite read, but like I didn't want to like, you know, I wasn't compelled to like quit reading it altogether. You know, it does clip along at a pretty good pace. There are characters that interested me, specifically this one character, Bane, and there's certain elements of the aesthetic that I found really appealing. So maybe you guys had that Audible subscription. Maybe you're interested in the idea, and maybe you're also fans of Brian D. Anderson from his other books. I think he's got a series, epic fantasy series as well. So maybe it still sounds interesting to you, and maybe it does. So that's Brian D. Anderson's The Vale, and thank you for visiting here at BookNest.eu. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.